friends, welcome to the Purple Zone, where public policy, practice, and people meet. Because policy isn't abstract, it's personal. So let's talk about it. Dr. Rebecca Winthrop, thank you so much for joining me on my show today. It is such an honor to have you here.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so I have so many things that I want to make sure that we cover. And first and foremost, I want to make sure that I introduce you properly to my audience. And not only are you the author of this book that we're going to talk about today, but you are the director of universal education for the Brookings Institute. And the Brookings Institute is a nonprofit that is focused on research. It's a nonpartisan that's focused on research and policy and education and improvements and all of those things for local, state, national, and global. And I have read a lot of articles from the Brookings Institute in my PhD program and even before, and I've read some of your work. So anyways, the Brookings Institute is it's an entity that I really like. So this is kind of cool just on that front to have you here.
Great.
And
it's a great place to work.
And included in the long list of so many things that you're involved in and have and written about, one of the things that I saw was actually you'd written an article about community schools. And I remember seeing something about serving on some coalition for national community schools. And that was an interest of mine too. Well, it is an interest of mine because it's a focus for me for my dissertation in reference to collaborative governance. So I may be reaching out at some point in the future, just heads up for that.
Great.
Yeah. And then you are the author, along with Jenny Anderson, of The Disengaged Teen, which is a book that just came out in January of this year that talks about the disengagement problem that we have with teenagers and the learning modes. And that's what we're going to dive into today. And so all of those things coupled with, I know so many other things that you do, that is who you are. So people know as we kind of dive into this conversation. So again, thank you for coming and having this conversation with me.
Very happy.
Okay. So this book, The Disengaged Teen, really, I don't even know, it almost sounds funny to say, but the way that you and Jenny write this book is so engaging. And I know that's not a pun is not intended. Yay.
We tried really hard at that, many drafts.
Well, you both succeeded. I read books, and then if I think that my friends will enjoy them, I share them with my friends, and we have this thing I just call it a pop-up book club. Like, we're not official. Different people come at different times. And I had them, I suggested this book, and in the month of May, a bunch of my friends got together. We had a 2-hour-long conversation. They were so interested in everything here. I think for them, it was at the same level as the book, The Anxious Generation, that so many people have been talking about. And then after the conversation, they said, we haven't talked about this long enough. And Alexis, we want some diagrams. We want to figure out how we can really integrate this in our homes and communities and schools. And I thought, yeah, okay, we're totally going to have that conversation after the summer because we're all very busy. And then kind of in the interim, here you and I are having this conversation. So I'm talking way too much at the beginning, but just kind of setting that stage of who you are, what this book is, and why I just find it so valuable. So
fabulous.
So the book, The Disengaged Teen, you talk about, I have my notes here that I'm looking down at. You talk about how we have an engagement crisis. And what I found so interesting at the beginning was that you acknowledge that technology plays into this, and you acknowledge a lot of different things that I think parents in particular just were pointing our fingers at, well, this is the problem, or it was definitely COVID, or all of these things. But you say, no, that's not true. This started before COVID, and we have data to support that. So what was it that you noticed kind of at the beginning that caught your eye about this topic?
Yes. Well, my colleague and I, Jenny, set out to really, we had a simple question, which was, why don't kids like school? What's going on? We know kids are hardwired neurobiologically to love learning. So why don't they love school? We know there's teachers like yourself out there teaching their heart out. What's going on? And so one of the things that we landed on as sort of a core problem that many other things emanate from is this problem of student disengagement. And it is not talked about very much. But it's true. It's a dirty little secret that over at least the last 20 years, based on US Census data, only about a third of our students are engaged in school. And COVID made it worse, way worse. Um, Social media, cell phones absolutely exacerbated it, and are like a disengagement enabler and make it a lot harder to re-engage kids, especially. But it's not the necessarily the genesis of the problem. And so that was a real aha moment for us, just being like, wait, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm. One of the things that you said straight out of the gate in the book, and I have it quoted here, so I'm going to read it. You said, more than ever before, what kids need to know is how to become better at learning. And so, from my perspective, like as a parent and as a someone who's been in the education space for 20 years, it was here's the here's a fast, like, this is the solution to this problem, just in terms of this is what we're going to talk about in this book. We're going to talk about teaching kids how to learn and understanding their learning modes so that we can get to that. And I really appreciated the positive perspective that I kind of felt like in the book, that it wasn't kind of like this drag down, ugh, this is terrible, and ugh, like it
Right.
felt
Kids are
it.
doomed. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt very I don't even know if solvable is the word, but like this is something that we can address and do something about. That's what it felt like as I was reading the book. So I was wondering if you would describe the four different learning modes that you talk
Hmm.
about in the book, because as you say, once you say it or once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And that is one of my favorite things just about life in general. So if you would just go in and describe what it is and like what it looks like and like how we can spot that in our lives as parents and then as educators.
So this was really helpful and interesting for us, and took a long time for us to see it in the research, because we did 3 years of research, partnered with nonprofits like Transcend and interviewed 65,000 students nationally representative and 2,000 parents, and followed 100 kids from 15 states, many of them over 3 years. So there's interviewed teachers and educate, lots and lots of work. And it took a while to emerge, which is kids are not just engaged or disengaged. It's not an on off switch. It's actually a little more nuanced than that. And again, if you can figure out how they are engaged, that's the secret to sort of unlocking them as parents, as communities, as teachers, as schools, so that they can engage more. So the four modes are passenger mode, achiever mode, resistor mode, explorer mode. And I'll go into each of them. So passenger mode is the kids who are coasting. They're doing the bare minimum to get by. They may love school to see their friends. And we saw this in COVID. It's not really that kids don't love school. They all wanted to go to school when they couldn't. They don't like what they do in school. They like seeing their friends. They like seeing the social aspect. They don't like the sort of so much the structure of school and the teaching and learning and whatnot. So for some kids in passenger mode, it's too easy. We found a lot of kids who were coasting by in passenger mode, showing up looking like they were paying attention because they weren't interrupting class or anything, and getting straight A's because it was just, they weren't challenged. And then we also found a lot of kids who were in passenger mode because they had struggled so long and not gotten the help they needed that they decided, I'm just not even going to try. A lot of these are neurodivergent kids. There could be many reasons for this. So that's passenger mode.
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got kids who are in achiever mode, which sounds like the top of the engagement mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is what we want. And in many
Yep.
ways, our school system has, for many, many decades, oriented around achiever mode. And being in achiever mode is when kids are trying to get a gold star on everything that's put in front of them. And there's many positive parts about achiever mode. Kids are organized. They have goal orientation. They're persistent. If something's hard, they'll keep, intellectually hard, they'll keep winding their way through. But we found there's a real dark underbelly to achiever mode. We call it unhappy achiever mode. Um, Part of it is uh, because kids often stop striving to be excellent, which is great. We want that. And they start striving to be perfect, which is
Mm.
impossible. No human being can be perfect. And then when they're trying to be perfect, they become really risk averse. And because they
Mm.
don't, they're doing, they don't want to upset the apple cart. They don't only want to do what is going to get them a good grade. We talked to so many kids who said, well, you know, I really wanted to write my essay on this. This is what I really thought, but I don't think my teacher's going to give me a good grade on that. So I wrote it on something else.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
so we know that learning, kids need to take risks. Um, the other piece that is a dark underbelly is kids um, really uh, sort of weren't very resilient. So would melt down if they got, a B minus or a B plus even sometimes. Like it was
Yeah.
the end of the world on this quiz. It's like, no,
Mhm.
they don't have a lot of resilience. So that was worrisome.
Mhm.
Um, and they weren't terribly proactive. We'll get to that with Explorer mode. They didn't have a lot of agency. They were really becoming excellent
Mm.
followers, which is not a bad skill. You want people to follow instruction.
Mhm.
And then we have kids in resistor mode. These are sort of quote unquote the problem children. I say that in quotes, sort of what we all as adults in society would call these kids. The class clown, throwing spitballs, taking long bathroom breaks, not doing their homework, maybe skipping a class, maybe skipping school, maybe fighting, maybe disrupting, or maybe withdrawing deeply and not engaging. So they are basically in resistor mode. They're avoiding and disrupting and or disrupting. But they do have something going for them. They are exercising their agency. They
Mm.
have some chutzpah, some gumption to express themselves behaviorally or verbally, often super inappropriately. So we're not sanctioning that part, but saying, hey, they are sending signals to their adults
Mhm.
at school or at home that this isn't working for me. It's just pointed away from their learning. And we found that they were much easier to pivot kids in resistor mode into
Mm.
explorer mode than kids in achiever mode in particular.
Mhm.
And explorer mode is really where we want kids to spend a bunch of time, not necessarily all time, but because it gets them ready for AI, a world of AI. It's where curiosity meets drive. They become unstoppable. They love learning. And when you love learning, you dig in, you persist, you try. If you get a little B plus, it's like, oh, well, how do I do it better next time? It's not just outcome oriented, it's process oriented. And so those are the four modes. We did find that most kids don't get to regularly spend time in explore mode in school.
Mhm. So it's interesting that so a couple of things. One, when you
Yes.
mention that kids in resistor mode are the easiest ones to switch over to, they're easier to switch over to Explorer than Achiever. That's really interesting to me.
Most often in our qualitative research, we found that.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. And then, I mean, as a parent and as I was reading this book, one of the things that, I mean, I'm like a visual, I think about things visually. So I was
Yeah.
thinking about my kids in some of the experiences that they have had. And my oldest, who is 20, we've been talking about different things about I mean, he's in college now. So we were talking about high school stuff.
Right.
And what I realized after having read your book was that the classes that he was the most engaged in, loved, came home and talked about, were the
Mm-hmm.
ones that were where he was exploring. And the ones where he really don't like want to do the homework or was like really procrastinated to the end or kind of complained about the class, those were ones where he was like either just a passenger or resistor in those. And it
Yep.
was because I kind of felt like, oh my gosh, he's not feeling engaged with the topic. And as he was going through that, I felt like I noticed it as a parent, but
Mm-hmm.
this book gave words to observations.
Mm.
And that was really key for me as a parent. And that was something that I really liked about what I was reading here and that I think is so valuable for people in the world today, that so much of this stuff gives words to, I think, what a
Mm-hmm.
lot of us are observing.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that because one of the sort of motivations for us to develop these four modes was to sort of make what is largely invisible visible to parents and teachers, because, and there's great data on this, engagement is super hard to actually see. We only see a piece of it, and that's the behavioral part of engagement. But how engaged a kid is also how interested they are, how do they feel they belong in our, do they feel comfortable in an environment? It's also, are they deeply thinking? This deep cognitive reflection. And that's a lot of internal stuff. We had one student in the book, and there's we have this in the book, but one student we interviewed, he was, I think he had just finished second grade, maybe second grade or third grade. I can't remember. He was fairly young. And I said, how was school? How was it all? And he said, well, I missed recess today, so it was not a very good day. I said, oh, why did you miss recess? And he said, well, I didn't get my worksheet done on time, so I had to stay and do it. I said, oh, well, why didn't you get your worksheet done? He said, well, there was this picture on the wall of the classroom of, outer space and how the earth spins on its axis. And I was just looking at it all classroom, and I couldn't figure out, how do people stay on the earth if it's spinning and spinning? So he was having this whole deep existential journey about centrifugal force and gravity and how does it work? And, and I think what the teacher saw was he wasn't paying attention. He was looking in the distance, not doing his work. And the teacher, it was an excellent school he went to, a very good public school, very well rated on everything. The teacher was probably like, this kid is not paying attention. This kid is not doing their homework. Honey, you're off task. So you can't see a lot of engagement, actually. And if the teacher had known, actually, hey, what's going on? What you thinking about? Would be like, that is such a good idea. Why don't you, come see me after school? I'll tell you all about it. In the meantime, do your homework. Yeah. Or worksheet. Yeah. But that's what I mean by making the sort of invisible visible.
Yeah. And so one of the things that this makes me think about in I think there's four things that four more things that I want to make sure that we get to.
Okay.
No, you're doing great. This is my responsibility to make sure that we get to
all shorter. Yeah.
No, please don't. No. It's my job to make sure we navigate to all the different points. Is that parents, one of the things that you bring out in the book is that parents think that this is something these different learning modes are something that only happens in schools. And so this isn't the first time that you mentioned that this has happened where, parents are pulling their kids from schools. They're thinking that this is an issue that only can be fixed maybe in schools. And there's other reasons that are happening. And you talk about the education system and marginalized students. And, you go into, good details about that. But what's interesting is that you mention that actually parents are key to helping with this. And so the question then is, what practical strategies would you recommend parents and parent groups can do to support our kids and also teachers at school to help foster more of these learning modes for our kids?
So this was a big aha moment for me, because I had been doing lots of work on family school collaboration, and I knew the power of positive partnership with families and schools. It's, schools are 10 times more likely to be better. So many good things when you really partner in a real, authentic, trusting way with teachers and parents or caregivers and, families and schools. But I hadn't really honed in on how significant families and caregivers are for motivating and engaging their kids in school. They're equally powerful. So if you're a parent or you're a parent group and you think, especially when kids get to adolescence, well, that's kind of out of my hands, I don't really know, it's not true. Families, peers, and teachers, basically have equal power when it comes to motivating and engaging kids. Now, parents, this is very good news, because we might not all be great at helping your kid with pre-calculus or algebra or US history or whatever, but we can, in our day-to-day, without doing huge amount of expensive tutors or having to quit work or anything like that, in our day-to-day, we can really help engage our kids in school. The number one thing, so powerful, is to model the thrill of learning yourself. It is contagious. There is this incredible researcher, John Hattie, who's like looked at this across the globe. He does these massive studies, millions and millions of kids. And he starts talking about parents as not as the first teachers, kids' first teachers, but as their first learners, which is an interesting switch. But his point is that if we are like, oh, I learned something new at work today, or, oh, like, I'll give you a small example. I have just had to get contact lenses because I had 3 different glasses prescriptions because I'm like turned 50 and I can't see. And I'm like, how am I going to manage? I have never had to stick my finger in my eye. It is very hard for me to get these damn contact lenses in. This is very fresh. It's 2 days in here. It takes me forever. So I'm like, you guys, this is so hard to learn how to do this. I'm like, it's new to me. I know many people do it. Like, I'm trying this. This is my strategy for learning. I'm trying different ways. I'm going on Reddit, trying to get, like, you are modeling yourself as a learner and how you're not giving up, why you're interested in it. So you can talk about what you learn. You can ask your kids. This is, because typically it's, how was school? Fine, good, fine, boring, don't ask that. Ask, so what, are you still doing, what's cooking and what are you reading? And, in English or something. And then what's the main character of that book? Oh, what is that setting? When did that happen? Like taking show your curiosity, take a teach me approach. So that is the number one thing to do. In the book, we have a whole toolkit of slightly different things that you should do for kids if they get stuck really in resistor mode, passenger mode, or even if they get stuck in achiever mode, how to break them out. There's a whole ream of practical suggestions. But if there's one thing, I would say just be curious, model curiosity, weave it into your day, talk about what you're learning, ask about what they're learning, have them teach you. And that goes a long way.
I love that because it's just, to your point, it's something that can just be like slipped right into the day. It's not like something that's extra thing that has to be done. We're with the kids in the car anyways. We're with them, at home in the meals and the getting the ready in the morning and then the evening time. So I think one of the things it just reminds me of, and it is not the same thing, but it kind of reminds me of some work that a friend of mine is doing at Boise State University, where like she's helping the youth in Idaho, and that a lot of parents and educators feel like all these different things pop up and it's like a whack-a-mole of trying to become an expert here, an expert here, an expert here. And she is really focusing on trying to help everyone shift their perspective to just an upstream prevention model. Mm-hmm. And that is what I feel like you're saying here, is that this is just really upstream prevention work, and it's just incorporated. It can just so seamlessly be incorporated into what we're doing every day. Yeah.
And most, even if you shift your percentage of conversation from what did you get on the test? What grade, like performance-based questions. And we should generally monitor our kids' performance. I try to monitor every 2 weeks, just check in where they're at, but don't monitor on a daily basis. We all have bad days. Like, let your kid have a bad day. And so some of the apps that show exactly what they got on every quiz, like, I don't want to talk about the presentation that I bombed when I come home at dinner. Like, you do want to know how they're doing. You don't, that's an important signal. But, if you can shift your conversation to even like 70% learning related, like what are you doing? What are you learning? How are you teach me? And just connecting what they're learning with the real world. Like, I'm in chemistry, I'm learning X, Y, and Z. Oh, interesting. That's how they make X, Y, and Z, right? Just natural things like that. It will go a long way for their thrill of learning, and thrill of learning drives engagement. Interest drives engagement. And you're exactly right, Alexis. Engagement is an upstream. It's like preventative medicine, because if you have more engagement, you have less chronic absenteeism. If you have more engagement, you have higher achievement. If you have more engagement, you have, higher mental health. Like, it's just good for everything, really.
Yeah. And as a parent, I know one of the things that I tried to do, I have some of my kids, I just noticed through their different phases were interested in different things. And this almost kind of seems a little bit goofy, but I worked to try to help my kids see when I didn't know stuff and letting them
Great
teach
example of
me.
modeling the thrill of learning.
Yeah,
Great.
kind of like one of those, they'd come and they'd tell me some things, and instead of pretending like I knew what they were talking about, so as an adult I didn't look stupid, I was just like, "Oh, I have no idea what you're talking about, and will you tell me like what that is, cuz I'm so
Great
not on the same
strategy.
plane, so not on the same plane with you." And I felt like for me, so what's interesting is in that moment, I mean, to your point, like what you're talking about, I don't even know that I really realized that I was like, showing them like, oh, you can find learning, curiosity and stuff. From my perspective, I was looking at it like, I want my kids to know it's okay that you don't know stuff.
Yeah.
And because I kind of have some natural, when my kids were younger, there's some like natural perfectionistic kind of
Mm,
things. And I had a kid in one who just was always very fearful in elementary school to take a pre-test because he kind of felt frozen, like, and it was really hard for him. And I mean, just some really sweet teachers
yeah.
that became such good friends of mine who were
Right.
just so patient and loving and helping him. One teacher like talked to him the entire class and then taught me, and we did it in our family about the power of yet. Like, you don't
Right.
know this yet, but you
Yeah.
can, right? And so
Yeah.
helping my kids, and so they did. It became oh, it's okay that I don't know that, and I can ask
Yeah.
questions and I can be curious, and
Yeah.
so
Perfect. And it could be about Minecraft. Like I ask a lot of questions about Minecraft, and I try to play with my son who's obsessed. And I love Minecraft because it's very explore mode. It's all self creation and creativity. And I'm very bad at it, but I can't like walk well straight. Um, but because I'm unskilled in the world of video games, but I try.
yeah.
And they know so much and they teach
Mhm.
me all the
Mhm.
time. Or Zelda, which my other son loves. And he's like, look, mom, if I power up here and I 2x over here, but that won't get me. And he's doing all this mental math. And, I ask him about it. Well, why wouldn't you choose that? Did you have a boss fight? But why didn't you like it could be about that.
Mhm.
Right. And I'm modeling the fact that I legit really don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. It's just such a natural, I mean, what I'm hearing is it can be such a natural way to integrate. And I know as a
Yes.
parent, sometimes like I hear you say, like, oh, I play Minecraft with them or Zelda. I know what those things are. I mean, I remember watching my cousins play when I was little and loving it. And now as an adult, sometimes I'm just like, okay, I really don't like this thing and I don't want to sit down here. But
I
what
mean,
I'm
I like,
realizing is, you know what? It like I do have like one kid that she's my youngest, she's 13, and I just think there are some ways that I can do better as a parent and trying to, being engage with her and like some curiosity, because
yeah,
I'm this after like reading this book, this is working to figure out what her exploratory
right.
mode and what things are interesting to her has been something that's like been on my list of
Mm,
of working into, because
yeah,
I kind of figured out my other ones that are like
right,
now off to college, but
right.
this one for me. So, anyways, this has been a
Yeah,
good conversation for me just for that,
yeah.
because it's like, oh yeah, I got
And
some
you don't
things I
have
can
to
do.
do it for a long time. Like I'm not down there for hours,
Yeah.
like I'm like got a 15-minute limit. I'm good. But like, but
Got it.
I'm
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
regularly.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask then too, and just kind of a piece of this, teachers obviously are important in this. And in the
Crucial.
book, yep. And you mentioned that that teachers sit on the front lines, and they're, and what that means though too is that they're sandwiched between assessments and having to
Hmm.
reach these standards and things they have to get through, and accountability things, and parents insist to their kids, that their kids excel. So what does it look like when a teacher is fostering exploratory
Mm,
mode and working to address this disengagement crisis? What does that look
yes.
like?
Yes, and you nailed it. We talk about teachers being squished in the middle between pressure from above and the system, and pressure from below, which is largely well-intentioned sort of pushy parents.
Mhm.
Um, and teachers can do a lot, e- even in their classroom without a change of school leadership, because school leaders, principals make a huge difference to a school. Um, and we've seen this in research over 20 years. There's a bunch of small shift practices that this researcher, John Marshall Reeve, that we really quote extensively in the book on this topic, um, has discovered really make a big difference. He talks about autonomy, supportive teaching. There are small shifts. There are things like providing your students with an explanatory rationale for why you're assigning something. So read this chapter because you have a test on Friday is not an explanatory rationale. I want you to read this chapter because I want you to see how the author, uses a fictional story, but weaves in historical events. So it like brings to, I'm making this up, but brings
Yeah.
to life this, whatever incident. That's an explanatory rationale. And then alongside that, things like at the very beginning of class, say, I always give this, I always go to science because it's so concrete, but like, say it's the solar system. And you're like, okay, today we're going to talk about the solar system, guys. Before you launch in, give some background on it, details, and then, ask for questions and then have an activity. Pause, could be for 2 minutes. This is not long, and say, say a little bit about the solar system, what it, you define. Does anybody have anything they're curious about the solar system? Does anybody have any questions about it? It takes students about 2 weeks to start asking questions because they've become so desocialized to just spit out their curiosities. 80% of kids' questions go unanswered in class. Not because teachers are not doing their job. They have to stay on track. They've got to get through the material. They've got very short class periods for most of the time. They've got classroom and it's very hard to do. So, kids have been sort of slowly desocialized to be curious. So that combined with a variety of other little teaching practices actually can make a huge difference. And it's basically giving kids a little bit of agency. Like, hey, what happened to Pluto? Why is that not it? And then teachers have to talk about what happened to Pluto and start there and then go to the rest of their lesson.
One of the things that I thought about while you were explaining that was something that I saw in a fifth grade classroom. This would have been years ago, and she's still a fifth grade teacher at my favorite elementary school in Lewiston, Idaho. Like several of my kids had her. And one of the things that I saw as a parent one day, and I feel like she did exactly what you're talking about here, is she was teaching math. And, now math is so different than it was when I was going to school a long time ago, just in terms of like, they teach them the why, they teach them a lot of different methods of getting to an answer. And I mean, I have total different thoughts about that I'm not going to dive into, but what I saw her do was each kid had their own individual whiteboard, and she had something up on, she had a projector up on the screen, and you would see the math problem. And she would put that up there. And then she would say, okay, everyone, I want you to solve the problem. So solve the problem. And then when they're done, the kids would every kid holds up their whiteboard to show the answer. And so then, she could see like, if, kids had the answer, whatever. And then once, everyone had done that, she would say, okay, who wants to share how they got their answer? So then one of the kids would share and she'd be like, great, and they would describe to the entire class how they got it. And then she would say, okay, who wants to describe a different way that they got to that answer? Right. And I was like, I was a young mom and I thought, I like this. And I could see the kids so engaged in the classroom in math in fifth grade, which I just was so thrilled about.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's an interactive, giving them some space, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. So I'm watching the time and we have 20 minutes until you have to move on to your next thing. And I want to make sure that we get to the kind of policy perspective of this, because this is a space that I live in on the state level. This is some stuff that I want to work on. And then also how AI is thrown into the mix.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Yes. I have a friend who lives in the ed tech world in Idaho, but that he also does a ton of national stuff. And I was mentioning to him that I was like, oh, Dr. Rebecca Winthrop's coming on my show and she's a Disengaged Teen author. And he was like, oh, I know exactly who you're talking about. And actually, I just saw her at a conference and I listened to her present her stuff. And I was like, what? I'm so jealous that you got to have that experience. And I loved that he knew exactly who I was talking about. And it was awesome. So when it comes to, and he helped me come up with one of the questions, which I
Great.
was like, that is such a good question.
Mhm.
I'm always happy for input on questions. So for the first one for policy, my question is, what would it look like if policy was actually designed with
Mm.
exploratory learning mode in mind,
Oof.
not just like student test scores, but their
Yeah.
lived experiences? What would policy, do you
Yeah.
think, look like on that level?
Yeah. And I mean, let's stick with maybe like school or district
Okay.
policy because
Yep,
there's
that'd be
many
great. Mhm.
layers.
Yes, I can. I'll ask you later
Yeah,
offline
yes.
about state one. Like
There we
if you,
go.
I'm like, okay, now I'm like getting you to agree with to that you have to contact that you have to stay in contact with me after this.
About Idaho state policy.
Hmm.
So school wide, I think
Hmm.
there is a continuum
Hmm.
of sort of policy changes that can happen. And sometimes, to be honest, you don't really need to shift real sort of legislated policy. You
Hmm.
just need to shift sort of norms and guidance that have
Hmm.
sprung up around legislative policy because it's
Okay.
more of a mindset shift of what you can do within
Hmm.
the frameworks that you're operating under.
Hmm.
So the continuum is, how, first of all, you bring parents as equal partners. You show them what good learning looks like. You have outreach, you have workshops. You do not just have a back to school night where they sit in teeny tiny chairs and you tell them exactly what you're doing and half of it goes over your head. You like sit in a circle, hear about their hopes and dreams, get to know them, build relational trust, and then really talk about what good learning looks like. Talk about the 4 modes. I really don't care what language people use, but you have to give parents an idea of what good learning looks like. Otherwise, they can't support it at home.
Hmm.
And they're going to sort of undermine it, not because they want to, but because they think they're doing the right thing. And
Hmm.
we learn that parents are undermining good learning. And because they have good intentions, they think they're doing what schools want, which is get good grades, go to school, get good test scores. So they're
Hmm.
putting a lot of pressure on kids, and that doesn't work. So, yeah, have a workshop around the 4 modes, etc. So that's one. There's really bring them in as partners. The
Hmm.
second thing you would do is really, like we just talked about, Alexis, your question around teacher practice. Do some really good teacher PD around student engagement. Most teachers, like the example of the teacher with the kid who was having this, like, the future physicist Nobel Prize winner who was
Hmm.
in second grade thinking about why people stay on the earth as it spins. Um, Teachers don't necessarily can't. It's hard for them to see full engagement, and so they undermine it, and then give them some autonomy supportive teaching practices training in PD.
Hmm. Hmm.
The third thing I would really do is think about, like, how is your school climate and culture supporting explore mode? One, be in my bonnet, and I will be happy to work with you on this if you want to bring it to Idaho, is because I really am upset about it after all this research. Kids who are in resistor mode, who start struggling academically, the minute they start struggling, they're they're very likely to go in resistor mode and start really disengaging. And it's a slow walk. It's not immediate. It's a slow walk to chronic absenteeism and losing them altogether from an
Hmm.
education standpoint. And we do the exact opposite thing. We take away their autonomy. We take away their interests. You cannot be part of Model UN or on the football team or part of any enriched, interesting extracurricular because your grades aren't, have slipped.
Hmm.
That is the worst thing we can do. That pushes them further to resistor mode. They don't have anything interesting. They have a lot of agency. Remember, it's just pointed away from their learning. You got to
Hmm.
find that agency and point it towards their learning. And we found that when kids flip from resistor to explore mode quickly, it was when they got more freedom
Hmm.
and more cool, enriched learning opportunities. So I do think we should be like, okay, it doesn't matter if your grades are slipping. You can still be on the football team. You have to have good attendance. And of course, you have to have good behavior. You can't go causing fights.
Hmm.
But I think that is like a statewide national campaign. It doesn't cost a lot
Yeah.
that we should do.
Hmm.
And then there's a sort of all the way at the other end of the spectrum is really kind of whole scale redesign where we think about mastery based learning. Kids can retake tests to get, to get better grades, which shows persistence. They have to do it within a certain time period, but like it's on them.
Hmm.
I've seen schools that do this, like everything they turn in this one school I'm talking about, kids can redo to improve their grade, I think up to 2 times. And they have a certain, window of time, and they have to keep track of it.
Mhm.
And that, man, those kids are resilient, and they learn to revise, and they learn to ask questions and go to student hours. You do a lot more learning experiences where it's not just um, knowledge acquisition. I know the Pythagorean theorem, but it's also using the knowledge you have to apply it to a problem. I'm going to use the Pythagorean theorem to create, I don't know, something in my community that needs to solve a problem. So
Mhm.
kids connect those two, and that becomes a lot more hands-on, not in a devoid of academic rigor way, because I'm not a believer in throw all the tests out and you don't need content. That's not true. We just
Mhm.
need kids to be able to use the content to solve problems.
Mhm. These are really good things, and I'm so grateful that you shared all of them because I know that there are people in the ed space that listen to this, and I would love to work with you on some of this stuff. And I know that chronic
Great.
absenteeism is a problem in Idaho because I'm well connected with our state superintendent, and they've put out content. And so, like, yes, especially I know that our community schools, the ones who have integrated that model, are working on that. So,
Yeah.
absolutely, I'm saying yes to taking you up on that
Okay,
offer.
great. Done
Um,
deal.
and then the last thing, the last several minutes that we have, I want to make sure that we get to AI.
Hmm.
I want to note that you have a really great conversation with on the Ezra Klein show
Yes.
that I want to encourage people to go listen to because you have a whole long conversation about it in there. One of the questions that my friend who heard your presentation, I texted him and I said, "Hey, what question do you have?" And his question was, which specific things need to change in how we educate kids
Mm,
due to the presence of AI versus how we educated students in the past? And by educated, he says what it means to educate a student pre and post AI. What must change?
hmm.
What must not change? And what should we
Yeah.
stop doing that we did before? Kind of like this
Right.
pre post thing.
Right. What's your friend's name?
Jeff.
Jeff. Jeff, that's an incredibly difficult question because, what I was sharing, I'm not sure which conference he was at, but what we are in the midst of at Brookings, and I share this with, and sort of got my head in student engagement and AI, and they're very connected because I'm quite worried that AI could make a bunch more passengers and not a bunch more explorers, and we want AI to help make a bunch more explorers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I chair this Brookings Global Task Force on AI in Education, and we're doing something called a pre-mortem, which is unlike social media, where we sort of took a wait and see approach. Let's wait 3, 4, 5, 10 years and see were there any negative consequences. We don't need to take a wait and see approach. We know child learning sciences and child development. Um, let's look at the technology as it's emerging and see what could be the potential risks. How do you mitigate them, and how do you use, therefore, keep the good stuff where it could be really impactful. And the risks, part of what we have, there's some clear risks, but part of what we've learned, which gets to Jeff's question, is from a child development and learning sciences standpoint, we don't 100% know what are the actual things that kids have to do on their own versus have AI do.
Mm.
Because we've never had this technology before. Like we're talking to neuroscientists and child development experts. What we do know is that kids do have to go through the process of learning, thinking, reasoning, learning. They still have to learn content because all of that forms neural pathways. Neurobiologically, they actually have to learn to think on their own. They can't, we can't just let AI think for them. That will be hugely problematic. Their brains will not develop correctly. The other thing that we do know is it is very unlikely that a young person will develop emotionally with sort of social interpersonal skills um, in a healthy way by just interacting with AI. That
Mm.
there's all these other things that are going on with human to human interaction. And we see this with infants and babies. Like kids learn language through this incredible synchrony with their caregivers. And If it's a screen doing the same synchrony, the same thing, same word, same they don't learn language. So it could be touch, it could be voice, it could be pheromone. I don't know. There's a bunch of neuroscientists are doing cutting edge work to try to figure this out. But we can't outsource our kids' emotional development to AI. So they will need in-person experiences to emotionally regulate, like all the things that underpin learning and go hand in hand with learning. If you're not emotionally regulated, it's hard to learn your multiplication tables. So not a perhaps satisfying answer, but it's an incredibly important question.
Yeah.
And I actually think it's almost the question. It's like the big question.
Yeah. I agree.
We have to figure out.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like everything we've kind of talked about in this conversation plays into the question, like gives context to the question and understanding, what can we do, those like connections that need to be made, those person to person connections, the questions that need to be asked. But then also, I think it might have just left me. I was thinking about something. It might be gone now. And
it's okay.
This happens.
It'll come back.
It'll come back. But I was thinking about how one of the things that, I got it. You said, one of the other things that I felt like was so profound is that you said, it just in your response, was that with social media, we took a wait and see, and we can't do that with AI. That's not the approach that we should be taking. And I feel like that really actually is an important part of the answer to that question that he asked, that it was in this post, now we have AI here. What, how do we engage with this? Do we wait? No, we don't wait. Yeah. And, we figure out what's going to be best for kids. And I really appreciate the answer, because it's about and from my perspective, again, it's about being proactive. It's about what types of upstream prevention can we do to make sure that we're integrating this appropriately. Yeah. There was an article that kind of went around some ed tech circles, and it was by Forbes, and the article was "What's Really Going On in AI in Schools? A High School Student's Perspective." And the answer, hint, they use AI to cheat. And it was interesting. Yeah, I mean, of course they do.
I mean, they're being rational. I actually don't blame students whatsoever. If you're going to assign stuff, I feel like teachers are stuck in a total bind. They've developed their profession, their expertise teaching one way, and now a technology comes out, and it's like, if you are going to assign stuff that can be done through AI, then kids are probably going to use it. Mostly. Some kids won't, but mostly.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because in the article, the student basically said, okay, well, this assignment that you said, I got to do this thing, and then I got to go home and write the paper. And he's like, what you're doing is you're inviting me to cheat. And they go through the article and basically say, right now, what they're observing is that the response to AI in some measure has been, how can we mitigate the cheating? How can we catch them in this? Versus the student who basically says, what if you gave us opportunities in class to engage with AI? And in class, to your point, they show the students talking, and he says, you let me share in class, let me share my critical thinking. Let me share where my curiosity is. And so that's why I feel like the AI conversation is so linked with the engagement conversation.
Totally linked.
To your point.
Totally linked. I totally agree with you. I'm so glad you saw that, because it is totally linked. And more I'm like, oh my gosh, it's kind of the same thing. Because the only path forward with AI in education from a student-facing standpoint, of course, there's tremendous things you can do with AI in back of the house, student data and teacher PD and all sorts of incredible stuff. But from a student experience point of view, the only way forward is actually to curate, explore mode experiences in real time, like a lot more individualized, interest-based, or chance to learn stuff and then apply it to something and showcase verbal presentations. Do you know what I mean? Like standing up, working over time, and measuring that rather than just an end goal, a set of knowledge, And
Yeah.
you still require, by doing that, some people think, well, you're not focused on actual content learning or, foundational skill building. Not true. You need the content learning and the foundational skill building, like literacy and numeracy, is an input into this
Mm-hmm.
broader
Mm-hmm.
sort of explore mode teaching and learning experience. And that to me is the big potential for AI, is to
Mm-hmm.
really help our schools reform towards that picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got to attend the National Big EdTech Conference down in San Antonio. And I was there just because like my BFF was presenting from my BFF from college was presenting, and it was like,
Uh-huh.
hey, and a chance for us to be together. And I walked into this space kind of not knowing what I was walking into. And it was like, whoa, there's a lot of like EdTech stuff in here, and there's a lot of AI stuff in here, and there's a lot of garbage in
Yeah,
this
a
room.
lot.
There's a lot of garbage in this room. And what I walked away from that experience was kind of a reinforcement of what I had always known and believed, which is technology and AI has a place in our world when we intentionally use it for the good
Yeah.
things that it offers. And so when it comes from my perspective, and a lot of things that I hear from parents and their fears and worries and all this stuff is that, hey, we're okay when it's intentionally included and at a good age for our kids, and all of these different things. And so that's why, I mean, that's one of the reasons I like that you say that it's like we need to, it's not a wait and see. We need to engage with this
Yeah.
and work and be intentional through this entire process.
Yeah. 100% said it beautifully.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. You have been fantastic. I've learned a lot from you. And you have an Instagram page. So I want to encourage people to go follow you
Yes.
on there. I want to encourage people to go get this book and read it. It's so good. I actually had a friend, he's a superintendent, and I had mentioned this book, and he texted me and he was like, hey, I'm looking for a book for my staff. Do you think that book that you mentioned would be a great PD? And I was like, yes, get the book and get
And
it
we
for
have
your
a
education.
study guide. People, the study guide's not on our website, but people can go to RebeccaWinthrop.com and message me, and I'll send them the study guide.
Yes. And
Yeah, or LinkedIn. I have a newsletter on LinkedIn. That's how we
okay.
connected, right, Alexis?
I found your email and
Oh, that was it.
emailed.
You emailed. Yeah,
Yeah.
to the website.
And I also have that study guide. So if any listeners like want the study guide, be happy to share that too. So again, thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to staying connected with you. Now you're stuck with
Likewise.
me. And I wish you best in all the things that you're doing. And thank you so much for what you're doing for kids in general.
Thank you. And you too.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of The Purple Zone. Thanks for being here. If you liked what you heard, leave a review on your fave podcast app or on YouTube. And from me to you, the heart of The Purple Zone says community is where policy comes to life.